David, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and drive the slides for you. You're ready when you are, sir.
Great. Thank you, Ben, and appreciate the introduction here and getting us to where we are. And my name is David Anandraj. I'm responsible for product management here, as Ben described, within the e-commerce segment of BCM1. I'm really excited to spend a few moments here with you to launch this updated flavor of business texting that we've been working very hard at. So with that said, Ben, if you'd move to the next slide, I wanted to take a few minutes to describe the ecosystem for business texting. Other people label it SMS messaging, et cetera, here primarily within the US. And I think this is an important backdrop for you to keep in mind. I've shared some of this during the Siptrunk dealer kickoff session we had some time back. But for those of you who may not have heard it, or for those that need a refresher, I think this is very important information for you. And it will make the rest of our presentation here and in fact, the newly launched version of messaging that much more useful and meaningful as you go through with this particular product. So what is business texting? It is often seen and thought of as the third leg of the stool for Siptrunking services, the other two being voice and numbers. So while often not the largest portion of a particular business's Siptrunking services, it is increasingly becoming a necessary and vital part of communication between a business and its customers. As you probably are familiar, even anecdotally or as a consumer yourselves, it is the second most reliable customer communication channel, second only to voice or phone calls. In fact, after the last dealer kickoff presentation, I received some data that I think would be helpful for you all to keep in mind. 78% of people wish they could have a business texting conversation with an entity they're doing business with. And equally important, 61% of businesses wish they could send and receive text messages using a business text number as opposed to their own personal mobile devices, et cetera. And very important information here, especially in the context of the fact that this is related to number-based texting, not short code texting, et cetera. So I think those two numbers are indicative of the sort of demand and necessity of doing business texting. And I think it'd be important for you to keep in mind as you pursue customers yourselves or other similar opportunities. That said, this third bullet point on the left half of the slide, this is Telecom Act language that describes business texting as an information service or a Title I service, as opposed to what we are usually familiar with, which is telephony or voice services, which means that the regulatory control for business texting really doesn't exist, contrary to what we're familiar with for voice. FCC is the regulatory body that does so. In fact, the delivery of messages is controlled entirely by the mobile network operators, such as Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, et cetera. What this produces is sort of an uneven playing field between messaging providers like ourselves, aggregators that actually hold the keys between the providers and the MNOs. And so what the MNOs have recently done is worked to create this second half of the slide here, two key mechanisms to ensure that business texting remains a viable and non-spam mechanism for customers to interact with businesses. One of them is called 10DLC registration, which applies to DID numbers, and the other one is toll-free verification, which applies to, of course, toll-free numbers. And like I mentioned before, this is intended to preserve the communication channel. And what the MNOs have decided is that they now need to very clearly know who's the actual sender of a business text message. By that, I mean not Siptrunk, for example. It would be the actual, for example, a doctor's office, et cetera. And why are they sending the message? Is it for specific use cases that are predefined as opposed to sort of a generic multi-use situation? Also, these processes don't lend themselves readily to automation. There's quite a bit of hand-holding. This is necessary to make these 10DLC registration and toll-free verification work. It does come with additional costs. These are passed through from the mobile network operators through a provider like ourselves to the actual consumers of the service. The guidelines determining what content an end user or a sender should provide keeps changing pretty frequently. This is, again, part of the fallout from not having a full-on regulatory body like the FCC, if you will. And so that all combines to lead folks to think of business texting as somewhat of a necessary evil, something they have to support because it's necessary, there's opportunity. With that, I think this is a fantastic segue point to hand over to my colleague here, May Valladares, to specifically dig into what 10DLC registration and toll-free verification looks like so we can support your business. May?
Thank you, David. So, hello, everyone. I'm May Valladares. My team handles the 10DLC and toll-free verification. So I will be presenting a quick overview of the 10DLC registration and toll-free verification process and what information is required. So beginning in 2020, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and other MNOs began launching their own 10DLC programs designated for A2P messaging over local phone numbers. So these programs were created with the intention to stop unwanted messages to consumer devices. So the major MNOs appointed TCR, or the campaign registry, to manage the 10DLC registration initiative. So for 10DLC, we need to have a verified brand, and identity verification is one of the crucial steps for each registered brand. So you will be provided with a job form requesting all the necessary information to register a brand and campaign, and there will be a separate form for toll-free verification. So for 10DLC, there are 3 steps in the 10DLC registration process. So we have the brand registration, the campaign registration, and the number assignment. So what is the information needed to register a brand? Next slide, please. Thank you. So for the brand registration, we need the legal company name of the business you are registering. So the legal company name should exactly match the name under which the brand or the business is registered with the IRS for US businesses. Then we have the brand name or the DBA. It should match the brand that is represented by the website or the online presence. Next is we have the tax ID or the EIN. So this is the 9-digit number in the EIN letter. So the EIN contains the accurate EIN and the legal company name, as well as the legal business address associated with the brand that is on file with the IRS. So if the brand came back unverified, the EIN letter will be the document that we can use to dispute the rejection. Next is we have the business entity. We have public, private, nonprofit, or government. So for nonprofit companies, for companies that are legitimate nonprofit organization, they must have a determination letter and a 501c3 status. Note that if the brand is already verified, you will not be able to change the entity type, the EIN, and the legal company name. If the brand needs to be updated, the brand needs to be deleted and register again using the correct information. Then we have the legal business address that is also found on the EIN letter. Then the vertical type, which is the category that best fits your business type when registering your brand. Say, for example, if it's for healthcare, information technology services, or nonprofit organization. Then we also need to have a website, which is a working website or an online presence that the customer has. This can also be a social media page, as long as the DCA can assess it and verify the business is who they say they are. Note that if there are prohibited content on the website, such as CBD, the campaign will be rejected. If the website is used to collect phone numbers, then there must be an opt-in language. It's an explanation of what they're signing up for. It can be a note that the message and data rates may apply, or a note from the website's privacy policy that indicates what information is collected, how it is used, and how users can opt out. So adding this will increase the likelihood of getting the campaign approval. The last one we have for brand registration is the contact information. So we need the name, the phone number, and the email address of the contact person who manages the messaging. So once we have a verified brand, we can now proceed with registering a campaign. So a common misconception of a campaign is that it will be used for marketing. So for 10DLC, a campaign describes the purpose of the messages being sent. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I think I'm showing up now as a panelist.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
for
no,
So for registering a campaign, you would need to select a use case. The use case describes the intended goal of the messages. Example is account notification, or customer care, or 2FA. So there are two types of use cases. You may have a standard use case that does not require pre or post approval by MNOs. And we have the special use cases that are sensitive and critical in nature and may require vetting or pre or post registration approval by MNOs. The next one is the campaign and content attributes. So you will be asked to answer yes or no to certain questions, whether the campaign has certain attributes such as embedded link or phone number. Please make sure that the content attributes are correct while setting up your campaign, because these fields cannot be changed. The next one is the campaign description. This describes the intended purpose of the overall messages. So your description must answer the questions: who you are, who do you want to reach, and why are you sending out messages? Then we have the sample messages. The sample messages should be specific, detailed messages representing the type of messages that will be sent from the campaign. So you must provide at least 2 sample messages. The brand name must be in the sample messages, and the instruction on how to opt out must be appended. Next is we have the message enabled numbers. So these are the telephone numbers that will be assigned to the campaign. Please note, you should not include the toll-free numbers here because the toll-free numbers has a different process. So you can only assign up to 49 numbers in one campaign. Next slide, please. Okay. So the next one is the call to action. So this is one of the important details that the DCA is assessing. So the call to action is an invitation to a consumer to opt into the messaging campaign. In other words, this is how the opt-in is obtained, or how they are getting consent from the consumers to send messages. The key point here is to be as accurate and descriptive as possible. The next one we have is the opt-in message. So if consumers can text in a keyword such as start, this is the response that includes the brand name, a confirmation of opt-in enrollment, how to get help, and a clear description on how to opt out. The opt-out message is the response to the stop keyword, which may include the brand name and should include an acknowledgement of the opt-out request and confirmation that no further messages will be sent. The help response message is a response to the help keyword that may include the brand name and additional support contact information. So campaigns are being reviewed manually by the DCA. So we highly suggest paying attention and entering correct and up-to-date information to allow the brand and campaign to be swiftly verified and approved. So we go now to the toll-free verification process. Next slide, please. So for toll-free verification, this is not actually whitelisting. So the approval does not guarantee that the customer won't experience any blocking. However, if the sent messages aligns with the verification application, this allows us to work with our peers more swiftly to share the campaign details with the MNOs and ask for the blocking to be removed. Please note that upon submission, it can take up to 6 to 8 weeks for a single toll-free number request to receive a response from our peers confirming approval, denial, or requesting for additional information. So what are the information needed for toll-free verification? It's actually the same with 10DLC. Next slide, please. So we also need to provide the message sender information. So this is the legal business name, the contact information, the business address, and the URL. For the toll-free number, the verification submission does not allow multiple toll-free numbers for the same business location and use case. In the event that they require multiple toll-free numbers, they would need to provide an explanation. So we would also need the category that best represents the use case or the content. For the use case or campaign description, this describes the purpose of the messaging. So if it's being used for calendar, for alerts, or for reminders. For the sample content, we would also require at least 2 sample messages that will be sent out to the recipient. The opt-in process describes how potential subscribers are opted in to receive messages. So we have a drop-down option there. It could be an IVR, keyword, or through web link. Then the call to action is would list the sender receive consent to send out messages to the recipient. So the call to action is more descriptive and provides more information on how the consent is being obtained. Then there is also a field there for additional opt-in information. If you could provide a screenshot of the web page or other supporting documents of the opt-in process. Then the last one is the monthly estimated messaging volume. So this is the number of messages sent every month. And that is the end of the 10DLC registration and toll-free verification process. I will now turn you over back to you, David.
Thank you, May, and I appreciate the thorough walkthrough. Just to reiterate, 10DLC registration and toll-free verification is a requirement for doing business texting with Siptrunk. So I hope you all were able to hear in the specifics that May talked through. Again, the content that we're expecting would be available for you to populate in what we're calling a JOT form. It's essentially a web form that you would turn in with the appropriate content that May just walked through. That said, just to pick back up to where I left off, the last comment I made was saying that business texting is often seen as a necessary evil. That's what the general space often sees it. Here at BCM1, we see it as an incredible opportunity, actually, to serve our customers. So Ben, if you'd go to the next slide. In fact, we see it as a sufficient opportunity enough to actually make an investment. And this is what I'm calling a center of excellence 3-prong approach to supporting customers wanting to do business texting with Siptrunk. So there's the 3 terms here, which the first one, which is a combination of tools that are online based, as well as knowledge-based articles, as well as people. And this last part is hugely important. As I mentioned before, 10DLC registration or toll-free verification does not lend itself easily to automation. So we feel these 3 parts combined deliver the optimal experience to our customers. And finally, or not finally, actually, second point here is to centralize across BCM1 a solid understanding of the TCR, the varying rules and regulations surrounding what the requirements are, et cetera, within one team. In fact, you already saw an expression of that via May, who actually leads our team for all business messaging requirements management, if you will, within BCM1, regardless of brand. And we felt this would be the optimal solution as opposed to having individual brand-based understanding of these varying requirements. And then finally, our intent here is to absorb as much of these varied requirements, complexities within BCM1, but present to you as our partner a simple but flexible solution that you could take to the marketplace, take to your customers, and be easy to do business with, specific to business texting. Next slide, please. And that brings us to, I think, the single stellar event here, which is the launch of our updated business texting solution. So currently, what Siptrunk offers is a straightforward SMS to email functionality that several of you are already using, and we appreciate that. But we felt it's very important to take that to the next level. So I'll walk through here quickly what we have done in this updated version. First off, we went under the covers, if you will, and started with the actual stack that supports messaging. So several portions of this came because of BCM1's acquisition of Florout in March of 2021 and 2022, excuse me. And what we've done is essentially retool Siptrunk's business texting stack using several capabilities out of the Florout acquisition. What that has now allowed us to do is to present business texting in two flavors. One, via a complete set of APIs that allows you to write code to and consume the service that way. This is hugely important to people who have potentially existing workflows or existing, for example, CRM systems that you write code to integrate across the business. This full set of APIs will allow you to bring us into your workflow without having to invent the wheel, if you will. But for those who are unable to do so or unwilling to do so or don't have a coding shop, for example, what we're now offering is an integration with Textable, which Rob Boca is on with us, and super excited to see the full demo of how Textable integrates with Siptrunking. And they provide, as you'll see here shortly, web, iOS, and Android apps that allow you to actually exchange messages directly with your customers via that UI. So excited to have that demo happen here shortly. It also comes with what we believe is industry-leading pricing, and I'll go through that in detail here in the next slide, which I think is again super exciting for you all. It simplifies it as opposed to making it complicated. And also knowing that this is new capability, we have intended to keep the original current SMS to email functionality alive, as well as supporting the new both API and or textable capability at launch. We are looking to see what could be the sort of life cycle for SMS to email. And I would strongly encourage you all to take a look at this new set of capabilities, both API and textable, to see if that truly serves your needs going forward. And then finally, it does come with complete support for 10 DLC registration, toll-free verification. Again, I'll stress the fact that both are a requirement if you intend to do business texting with Siptrunk. Next slide, please. So this is the pricing. And again, a new approach from our perspective here. We've taken a look at, even the guts of what goes into creating pricing. So you'll see here, this is very SMB or small to medium business friendly, beginning with what we would call a starter package of 200 messages for $9.95. We believe that'll get you in the door, and for our partners and their customers to get in the door. And in the first, we've included both SMS and MMS, as well as long code and toll-free messaging. And probably the most important component of this nearly all-inclusive model is that bullet point in italics, which is it includes the carrier pass-through surcharges that I mentioned in my introduction to the business texting ecosystem. So as opposed to having per message surcharges as a separate dollar value, when you buy 200 messages and at $9.95, you will know upfront going in that all of your messaging costs for those 200 messages are included. All per message costs are included. This, however, does not include 10DLC registration or toll-free verification charges. May talked about phrases like brands and campaigns. These are specific costs per brand, per campaign. Again, these are passed through to us, and we intend to pass those through to you. Those are not included in the package pricing. And then finally, there are terms of service and acceptable use policies that go along with this pricing model. Next slide, please. So to keep in step with sort of this revised model, this updated model, we've made a few changes to the Siptrunk portal. And I wanted to show you for those of our customers and partners who do not have any messaging enabled numbers, this is what your Siptrunk, the My Messaging page, which is a brand new setup, would look like. So it'll give you the varying options available for pricing, as well as this red rectangle there that'll give you the very first step you need to engage with, which is either an email or calling to initiate messaging. Just so to be clear here, the reason we are starting with a manual step is because of the requirement for 10DLC registration and toll-free verification. So we want to make sure we start you off with the right path to go from there. Mitch or Ben, can I take share, because I want to show this next screen here that'll show what the Siptrunk portal looks like for customers who do have numbers. So let me do that here real quick.
Sure, go ahead, David. You've got full control.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's see here. So this screen here is for customers. It's actually my demo account here, and it shows the same My Messaging
Hold on a
page.
second, David, let me get out of here real quick. There you go, David. You're good.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Ben. So yeah, so this is the Siptrunk portal for partners and customers who actually have message-enabled numbers. You'll see, for example, I have two here in the middle where it says DID. I wanted to quickly walk you through a couple of components here before handing the baton off to Rob at Textable. So you'll see, for example, if you click on package pricing, you should be able to see here a list of all the current available options, but then you also see at the bottom the green highlighted one that shows the package that you have bought, right? So it's important information there. And then if you click on this how to use messaging button, it gives you those two options that I described for consuming Siptrunk's updated business texting. So you could do API-based consumption. If you click on learn more, for example, this is our full set of API docs along with examples about sending, receiving messages, as well as getting message delivery receipts or MDRs. And then if you go to the second panel here, that's the second option to consume messaging via Textable. Click on learn more. We'll kind of describe Textable briefly, and then a start here link will actually take you to a page where you could sign up for a Textable account and proceed with using Textable. So on that note, I'll hand the presentation over to Rob Boca. Rob, thanks so much for partnering with us on relaunching business texting for our Siptrunk customers. And over to you.
Great. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, actually. Sorry, guys, I'm having a small issue on my side. 1 second. All right, can you guys see I believe you should see
We got you.
picture of me. Great, perfect. All right, guys, thank you. My name is Rob Boca. I'm the founder of Textable, and David, thank you again for the intro and the team for having me. Obviously, thanks to our viewers for joining. I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of Textable, and then we'll get into sort of the meat and potatoes of it. So Textable is a bring your own carrier text messaging application that allows resellers of Siptrunk and to text enable their customer's phone number in minutes without writing a line of code. So, we offer experiences both on web and mobile that range from what I like to call a, more than basic, with features like away messages, canned responses, and keyword auto replies, to a more advanced feature set with things like drip campaigns, blasts, keyword list subscriptions, appointment reminders, integrations, and more. So, many of you are probably here because you have some idea of how you might utilize business texting. Some of you probably have customers who have been waiting for this patiently or not. And I like to get the gears turning a little bit by reviewing some use cases first. And I'll go through a couple stories maybe on how you could sell that customer. So I'm going to switch over here. Can you guys see this slide?
Yep. We can.
Perfect. All right. So again, I like to just sort of review a few use cases. It's really helpful to get the story. Customer service is one of the very obvious generic ones, but as consumers gravitate away from voice and more towards chat, customer service is just one of the larger use cases we're seeing today. Auto sales and service actually. And I like to use this story often, not only because we see it be engaging, but it illustrates a lot of the stories on how you can use business texting. So, you've got customer service, be it the service desk, maybe scheduling appointments and reminders, doing follow-up and surveys, and sales might be use it for outreach. They may use it for drip campaigns and automated follow-up, right? And then there's, of course, your generic marketing use case there. From a dealership perspective, they may want to reach out about service or sales promotions. Take it over to your service businesses. You've got things like pest, lawn, and home care. I'm sure there's many others, handyman services as well, plumbers, etc. The obvious focus again is appointment reminders, but just like auto and really all of these use cases, there's a generic customer service, sales, and marketing use for all of them. Retail, restaurant, hospitality. This is definitely a vertical where we see heavier usage, and in the sense of higher conversation count and higher amount of interaction in between, inside of conversations. Customers are generally younger, more trendy and hip, and they want to communicate that way. So they'll text for things like reservations, events, frequently asked questions. They'll let you know that they're running late, honestly, for a reservation often. It's just the way that they're used to communicating, and they're expecting to be able to communicate with that business today. Another cool thing we've seen folks do is set up an autoresponder there, right? With things like menu, hours of operation, and links to directions, and also their website, or even sending menus back to people. And then you've got wellness, medical wellness, and veterinary. Again, big use case would be appointment reminders. And there's a big reason for that. Appointment reminders are proven to increase the revenue of that business by recapturing your no-shows and your last-minute cancellations proactively, instead of missing out on the opportunity after the fact and following up saying, hey, can we reschedule? You may be able to fill in those empty spots ahead of time. Another thing that I've seen as well, probably driven by COVID, but just again by natural, people's desires on how they want to interact. A lot of providers, in that space are integrating messaging into the customer experience, or the patient experience, I should say, for things like arrival instructions and post-visit care instructions, follow-up surveys, and things like that. Legal, HR, and insurance. Actually, I want to add finance to that as well, especially more recently there's a big lawsuit against one of the big broker dealers where they were found to be using their personal devices and personal numbers to communicate with, which is a big no-no. So you're seeing a big shift in any of those customers want to move those communications to, company-owned, company-sanctioned numbers that can then synchronize to proper archival tools. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in requests for those sorts of things, and we're actually developing a few features around compliance, archival and search and discovery as well. That's those are definitely just a few of the many. That's actually a list compiled from some of the more heavy use cases that we generally look at towards the end of each year to identify what features we should focus on. And so without further ado, I'd like to show you guys a brief overview of Textable, the app itself. I'm going to touch on the setup stuff a little bit, but we've also documented that fairly well. And I think we're going to include some links and follow up. And I think there's even links inside of the portal as well at this point for accessing Textable and our documentation. Let's see, switch over to the demo here. Now for my demos, I like to sort of treat it like reading a book. So I'm going to start from the top left and touch on each feature very briefly. You know, there's an exhaustive feature overview here inside of the application. So if you do sign up, you can actually get a very good breakdown on each feature, how to use it, and so even some tips, best practices, things like that. That's all included inside of the application, making it easy for you and your users to access that, and hopefully, you know, easing the pain of onboarding. So again, this is the web application here. I can overlay the our mobile app in a bit just to show you what that looks like here. But essentially, we offer web and mobile application both on iOS and Android. They all offer push notifications. So even if the browser is closed, you'll receive those notifications away from your desk. And again, on your mobile app, just as you would expect from any chat app. Over here, we've got our number switcher. This is what allows me to utilize multiple numbers. So you can see here, I'm signed in as my personal number, but I've also got a couple numbers provisioned to me and shared with me that I can have access to. That's fairly common. Again, back to that car dealership scenario, you've got an auto, you know, you may have a salesman who has a personal number or a general manager who's got a personal number who may also have access to the service desk and customer support desk. And so they'll want to switch into that to either monitor or participate in conversation. So again, I just switched over to a shared number here. And you could see brings you right into my chat conversation screen, which is where I spend most of my time. I could start a conversation either from my list of contacts here, or somebody can message me in and I'll get that notification. These contacts are entered in automatically based on a message being transmitted, and these details can be updated manually via API or one of our integrations. You know, so very standard UI here. You got your chat, your list of conversations on the left, and your active conversation here on the right. We've got basic, or you know, we got the basic features like MMS, so pictures, videos, documents, etc. You've got canned responses, which are scripted replies, things you find yourself commonly saying. Personally, I use these for, hey, I'm on the phone right now, I'll call you back later. But it could also be something in a sales or customer service perspective where you stay on script with what you generally say and reply to something. We're also looking at utilizing that feature a bit more in some AI stuff down the road. Obviously, everybody is investing in AI right now, so we're trying to figure out where we can help improve the experience there as well. Over here, we've got the drip campaign. Again, the drip campaign is essentially a set of scheduled messages that go out on a predetermined time. This is great, again, to that car dealership scenario where you have, I'm actually going to jump over here to my drip campaigns and give you, example here. Here's a pharmacist example where, they may have a list where you subscribe because it's a new pharmacy and they want to send you out some notifications here. So they may trigger a drip notification that goes out, in a minute of send, and then it follows up about a week later. And the whole point of them is to, again, get your interest into a conversation and take back over should you need to. That's pretty much it for the conversation screen. Over here, we've got the away message. This is essentially an autoresponder. Think of it, some folks use it as simply an away message that auto replies if they're away on vacation or closed. Some folks actually use this as sort of an IVR in the sense that they'll set up an away message as a menu of sorts where they'll put keywords in for people to reply with. So a restaurant may have their menu and menu as a keyword, or jobs or reservations as a keyword, and those things can trigger replies back via the canned response feature. When adding a canned response, I have the option again there to add in one of those keywords, and that is what configures that auto reply. Jumping over here to contacts, again, each number or user in the system has their own contacts that are compiled based on communicating with folks or imported via CSV. We also have some integrations that will synchronize to a CRM like HubSpot and Pipedrive, and we've got some other integrations coming down the line as well. We also have webhooks that allow you to synchronize with things like Zapier. Over here, we've got a list feature. Lists are essentially ways to segment out your customers, right, into a notification list, maybe. Oops, that was a bad spelling there. And so I can come in here, add folks to my list manually, or they can subscribe via keyword as well. And again, I can combine that keyword feature in the canned response to trigger a confirmation back to that person. Down here into Blast is where I'm going to utilize those lists. And this is, this is sort of a one-to-many. So this is great for marketing, promotions. It's good for staff notifications or just any sort of group communications where you need to get one message out to a large group of people. From a compliance perspective, we've added in some features like a default compliance footer. This gets set every time a user gets created with at minimum a reply stop message. But generally speaking, we recommend putting a simple identifier in there. And there's some best practices to be read about on what you could also include. But again, that gets copied in every time I send a blast here. So we also capture keywords automatically, opt-out keywords automatically and handle that for you. So stop, end, cancel, quit, or unsubscribe get handled. That contact gets marked as opted out, and you no longer can send to them as a user until they reply back with start. Again, these all follow industry standards, and we do that for you so that as a reseller, you don't have to worry about that. From a end user perspective, they'll see here that a user has been opted out. And if I'm inside of that conversation here, it lets me know that, hey, I can't send to this person because they've opted out. And it lets me know how they can opt back in. Last here, we've got our reminder feature, and this is our scheduled message. This is basically where we can do appointment reminders, scheduled messages, etc. And so if I go in here and I want to create a reminder, I can choose my recipient, date and time, and enter in my message. We've included some basic support from merge fields, and we're looking to expand upon that in the future. When a reminder gets sent, or sorry, scheduled, oops, let me schedule something out here in the future. It puts a little badge notification on the calendar for me, letting me know I've got things scheduled, and I can quickly at a bird's eye view see which I need, what's going out, what I can modify, etc. And as long as the message hasn't been sent, I can still modify the content and the time. Last, we've got our integration library here. Again, this is just a sort of a preview of what we've got started with, but we've got HubSpot, Pipedrive. And so for these guys, we consider them a CRM, right? And so with every CRM integration that we build, we will have the same functionality, and that includes contact synchronization, meaning we're going to look up that phone number in your CRM, and if a contact matches, we will update the details on Textable. And we'll also, once matched, create a conversation log inside of your CRM, so that inside the CRM they also have a record here, and that actually plays into that compliance thing as well. That can actually satisfy some compliance needs, so long as you're done taking and archiving those needs further. Over here, we've got a webhook relay feature. This essentially allows you to receive a copy of every message sent or received to a URL provided, and that allows you to do integrations with things like Zapier and whatnot. Again, I think there was a potential audience here, folks who do development or may integrate themselves. You may want a hybrid where you have a solution where you can, where you can use something off the shelf, but there's always going to be the need to program some sort of workflow. And truth be told, that's actually how we find resellers finding the most success, is when they automate sort of the voice, the messaging, and everything as a whole to help really become sticky and solve that customer's problem. And so our integration library is certainly something we're striving to provide to help you guys solve that. And then over here, we've got Slack, Teams, and Chat. We're also working on a WebEx integration as well, but today these three work as an inbound message notification. You set up a channel, it receives, it sends a message when a new message comes in. This is great for discussing maybe a customer support line internally, and then someone can navigate back to the application to respond. We are working on updating this in the future to allow for in-app replies as well. So you will not even need to leave your chat app like Slack or Teams in the future. You'll authenticate as a user, and then you'll be able to use the messaging right inside of that app. I think that's a good bit of the of my demo here. As far as managing users, right, it's fairly straightforward. Adding a user, very simple. You're going to enter the name, the email, the organization. And so the organization is how you're going to sort of multi-tenant your account on Textable, right? This is the business, or in 10DLC speak, this would be the brand. You enter the org, you add a user to that org, and then that gates number sharing and some other organization features to those users. Choosing your provider Siptrunk from the dropdown, entering a phone number that's been enabled through the documentation, through the guide that we've shown you. And once you click add user, that user will get a welcome email welcoming to the app, instructing them to set a password and sign in. Once you've done that, and assuming you've completed those steps on the Siptrunk side, your customer or you will be messaging right off the bat. I went through, I think, most of our integrations here. I'm going to touch back on some planned integrations. So let me fix that here. Sorry, just grabbing that slide. All right, so some integrations that we're looking for. So we believe that messaging is truly just getting started, right? So one of the first things we're looking to focus our development support on is actually integrating with the PBXs that you guys support and sell today. So, NetSapiens, we have a large project install with BCM1 actually utilizing that. So we've done some things like click to call, and we're looking to do more things in the future, like call history records, and even potentially receiving voicemails as messages. Some other platforms that we're looking and working on are 2600 Hertz and things like obviously free PBX and 3CX as much as they're willing to work with us. The whole point there is to try to provide as much of a unified experience across the messaging app that you can provide to your customer and the voice product that you're already selling. The chat apps I mentioned are going to be updated to support in-app replies and threads. We're adding support via the Office and productivity suites like Google Workspace and 365 for your contact and calendar sync. And then ultimately we'll be adding Drive, Dropbox, and Box support to that, and encompassing some file sharing access as well. So being able to send an MMS via your Drive without having to drag and drop. CRMs, like I mentioned, Salesforce and Zoho are currently in development. And then we're starting to look at some POS and e-commerce solutions as well, as we're getting more and more requests for that. Specifically, many of the reasons you'll see the integrations listed here, they're given priority, often because they have open APIs. And some of the platforms that we've been asked to develop with have more closed ecosystems. And so while we want to develop with them, that sometimes limits us. I think last for me here is just talking about our plans and pricing. So all right, so Textable, we offer 3 plans on the retail. I think the one plan makes the most sense for most of our partners here today, because it'll give you a single place to manage all of your customers and abstract away Siptrunk sensitive details like API credentials. But I want to go through the the other 2 plans just to explain them. So we've got basic. It's a $5 a month account. It's meant for individual users with very low volume, simple usage. We've included some basic features like away messages, which is those autoresponders, which you can apply keywords to, canned responses, and those keyword replies. It's a single user, meaning single login, single phone number. There's no way to access multiple numbers or manage multiple users from that account. That goes the same for the Pro account, which is a more feature-rich account, but again, meant for single number, single user. It includes the basic features, but also has blasts, contact lists, drip campaigns, reminders, and the integration library. And then again, the Teams/reseller option, it starts at $75 a month. It includes 10 users, so you can actually divvy that up amongst yourself or any one of your client companies. We count license count as a whole, so it's essentially $7.50 a month with a 10 user minimum. Once you go over that, it just increases per user. Again, every one of those Teams users is a pro user, but also has some multi-user, multi-org features like admin controls. Organization admins can see all of their users, reset passwords, emails, and control number sharing. And they can also control things like consent management, which is a feature that we allow organizations to apply across to just to make sure that you get opt-in consent initially. And then there's also individual user permissions, being able to toggle specific features on and off. And then that number sharing as well, which allows you to use multiple numbers across an account for things like customer support and whatnot. I think that ultimately covers our pricing plans and things like that. What I really feel like, again, the MSP, the Teams account really is a good place because it abstracts away when you add a user here. It abstracts away the API credentials. If you were to set up a user as a basic or pro, they actually have a provider field and API details here where they would ultimately see your Siptrunk and credentials. So it's not ideal, but we do have some folks using that internally that way. Getting started, as I mentioned, I think there's going to be some links distributed. I also know that there are links inside of the portal. They'll take you directly there. Every account comes with a 7-day trial, so you guys will be able to just sign up, give it a shot before you have to pay anything. And again, you could add as many users to that account in that trial as well. After 7 days, it'll start the billing, and that will become your anniversary dates. The setup guides are also included there as well, so everything should be fairly self-service, but we'll be glad to help on our side, and I'm sure Siptrunk folks as well. I'm going to hand this back over to David.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the super thorough review here. Just one thing before I hand it back to Ben or Mitch. 10 DLC registration and toll fee verification. While we said it's a requirement across the space. So this is not something unique to Siptrunk or to BCM1. Any number that you use for messaging from a business perspective must undergo 10 DLC registration or toll fee verification. So I just want to make sure it's clear that we are abiding by, if you will, the MNO's requirements to do so. So with that, Mitch, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and we got a number of good questions here. So I'm going to circle through a few of them. I know we're getting close on time, so we will put all of the questions out to you guys afterwards as well. But David and Rob, let me shoot a few common ones we had over to you really quick here. The first one was for David. Will there be a sample 10 DLC registration form?
Sure, we can share that with you. It is that job form that we mentioned, but we're happy to do so.
Okay, and then another one for David in terms of short code. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, we've in the works. Right. We've looked at it, are looking at it. We want to be sure we devote resources and attention to where we think the sort of the lowest hanging fruit in terms of opportunities for both our partners and ourselves. So possibly in the future, but as of this time, yeah, we're focused on just number-based messaging, non-short code, if you will. And then is this HIPAA compliant, David? Yeah, so if you're using along the lines of consent and so on that Rob alluded to and on our end as well, so long as consent is supplied and acquired by from the customer, and you're following the basic regulations and rules that May described as well, specific to the use cases and appropriate information for 10 DLC registration, you should be fine. So there are no outstanding issues specific to HIPAA there. And then one more for David, and we'll kick it over to Rob for a couple. How does this affect the legacy email to SMS? Yeah, like I mentioned, so at launch, we will continue to support the SMS to email function. And so, right now, for example, this is live and in production in the Siptrunk portal. And if you're continuing to use SMS to email, or you want to add more numbers to an existing account, we will continue to support that. That said, again, back to my comment from before, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at either the API-based ingestion of this new capability into your existing workflows, or the full featured capability that you just saw via Textable. In fact, I think you would get remarkably more value out of either of those options than you would today from just a straightforward SMS to email. But out the gate, we expect to support it. We intend to take a look at that functionality here pretty quickly to see if it's truly providing the value that it's intended to. That's where we stand today.
And then one follow-up to the short code, David. Will this allow partners and customers to receive short code?
You mean meaning messages from short code to a long code, for example?
Correct.
Yeah. So if the long code number is obviously tied to an account of ours, a Siptrunk account, yes, you would receive responses back from those short codes. Correct.
Perfect. And I know there's plenty more piling in here, but for the sake of time, guys, we will go ahead and skip forward. And in terms of follow-up, we can set follow-up with Rob as well for anyone interested in exploring the Textable piece, and get you guys some more clarification on any other questions that roll in after the presentation here. So with that, we'll go ahead and skip forward. And we'll hand it over to our Director of Engineering, Michael Hawkins, for a HyperNetwork update and deep dive.
Excellent. Thank you. I am super excited to be here today and talk with everyone about one of our first patented technologies. So let's go ahead and dive in and describe a little bit about what this is, and equally importantly, why we spent so much time and so many resources investing into it. So I want you to jump in a time machine with me for just a second. We're going to travel back to September 2021. One of the main carriers in the North American dial plan, their logo happens to be featured here, ended up having a really bad day. And they downed about a third of the North American inbound dial plan. And it was at that moment, as it was happening, people started realizing, gosh, no matter what the logo is, no matter what color it is or what letters on it, no matter how much they've invested into the network or how much they've poured into marketing, it is possible for any carrier, tiny or huge, to have an issue, an outage, or a bad day. And because of that, what we found was a lot of cascading, or I'll say one tier underneath that main provider, they had some real issues with that as well. So for example, or in this particular example, bandwidth had a real issue. It hit the national or the international newswire. We usually don't put logos up here. I don't like to do that as a general case. But this one was a big enough of a news event that I think it's worthy of talking about. When that happened, all of a sudden companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple, and others very in similar positions to ourselves, we were unable to deliver inbound voice calls to our customers. In some cases, those are business critical voice calls. In some cases, those are life critical voice calls. But in either way, those calls were unable to be delivered. And it caused a massive outage and a massive problem across several different days. So that's why this product is kind of here. Now let's talk about a little bit about what it is and how it works. In general, if you're familiar with the telecom industry, you might be familiar with the idea of an 8x express. This product works in a similar fashion, albeit differently technically, but in a very similar fashion to how you would protect your 8XX numbers. It essentially allows us to go ahead and take one inbound DID number and register that to multiple carriers upstream. What that does is, in the event that carrier A is having a problem, or in this case, carrier 1, as we've got on the example here, we can immediately, through an automated fashion, enable our automated rollover to that second carrier. That then allows us to bypass that carrier who's having a problem, whether it be a physical issue, a complete outage, voice degradation, etc., over to that second carrier who's having a much better day, deliver those business critical, life critical, inbound DID calls in a way that no other provider can, and do this in a very short time frame, allows us to continuously beat those mean time to repair from the carriers, as well as offer the industry's first SLA on a product like this. So let's walk through just a couple quick examples here. We'll start at the top and work our way down. One of the carriers had an issue. It was a fiber cut. People were impacted for over 24 hours. Our ability to reroute from carrier A over to another carrier, we were able to restore our customer services in 32 minutes. When those are impacting business critical or life critical calls, again, that seconds matter, minutes matter, and the ability to route around those issues is extremely impactful. Level 3, so again, just to kind of say that this is not just a complete outage. We're watching the entire conversation to understand how well these calls are being delivered. So they were having an issue with degraded audio. It ended up being a switch failure, 9 hours to get a replacement. We were able to route around that issue in 28 minutes. Call failures, again, undeliverable voice calls to those inbound DIDs, took 7 hours to resolve. If that's your cash register, if that's how patients are coming in the door, a major issue, as opposed to that 7-hour outage, we were able to restore that in a mere 18 minutes. So as you can see, those are excellent timeframes for restoring the service in the event that there's an upstream, I'll say local, regional, or national carrier outage. When I take a look at what this is, I'm not going to read this entire slide for you. It's a little bit of a word salad, but I do want to walk you through the theme of it. And essentially what we're saying here is, by combining the different products that we have, that we're able to work with, we can do things that other carriers can't. It will protect a complete voice service protection from, rather it's a WAN outage on a circuit, we can reroute against that. Rather, it's an upstream carrier outage, a problem with toll-free DIDs. If the PBX goes down, you need to be able to still deliver those calls to a 10-digit DID. All of these things put together start creating this unassailable business continuity story when it comes to customers that are looking for complete voice service protection. So let's talk just a quick, I'm going to hit on 6 simple advantages or distinct advantages for you on the BCM1 HyperNetwork. So as we've kind of mentioned, we're using multiple tier 1 carriers behind the scenes, and that allows us to make sure that we're delivering those high quality voice communications to those inbound DIDs in a very dependable and reliable way. It's also going to take the business continuity story that most people have when we're talking about outbound redundancy or the ability to overcome an issue with an underlay, such as an internet circuit, to the next level by being able to provide resiliency for those inbound DIDs. Rapid response to outages, as you saw on that one slide, we're able to consistently beat carriers' mean time to resolution when it comes to those outages and restore our customers in minutes, as opposed to hours. Unlike those traditional methods that would require a number to be ported, which can take at a minimum days if the carrier is not having a bad day, we're able to do this behind the scenes with our patented HyperNetwork technology to update that national database that says, hey, please find this number at carrier B as opposed to carrier A. Lastly, one of the things that we've done here is we've actually invested quite a bit into increasing the coverage of the HyperNetwork, which now covers the vast majority of the US population, 80+%. And then we've also taken and we've shored up that infrastructure to the point where we're able to offer contractual SLAs, giving you a peace of mind to know that that business critical voice is protected and we have skin in the game. So I'm not going to read those 6 again for you there, but this is a nice succinct slide that shows you the advantages of the HyperNetwork and what it can do for you and your base. When we talk about the price on this is by far my favorite piece. Anytime you're talking with a customer who's doing inbound CCaaS for their business, where that's their cash register, or a hospital who either has regulatory reasons why they have to be able to receive numbers, or reputational issues from retailers. This is the absolute cheapest insurance policy you're going to find on the market. And it's based on the total number of DIDs that qualify for the HyperNetwork. So for example, if you've got a large customer with 1,000 numbers that qualify for that on a 3-year term, the entire cost for all of the resiliency that we've built in, those multiple upstream carriers, the infrastructure necessary, and all of the intellectual property, that patent to be able to switch from carriers, $250, which I think is an amazing value for that price. If you have questions about the footprint or if the numbers fit within our HyperNetwork, we do have a tool that we can very quickly input those numbers in for you in multiple formats, multiple ways, full DID, NPA, NXX, et cetera, and give you that feedback within minutes on what qualifies and what doesn't. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there and turn the mic back over to Mitch.
And yeah, we'll just wrap it up with some Q&A. So I think the main one was, how do I go about procuring HyperNetwork as a Siptrunk partner? Ben, if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a Siptrunk partner, you've got two methods. If you first want to get with the account manager, list out your DIDs, and then we'll send it over to engineering to pre-qualify it. And then we'll kind of make sure we also have an engineer involved to make sure the use case actually fits the model. We don't want to sell you anything that isn't the proper fit. So again, let's first qualify the DIDs, and then we'll get into an engineering engagement.
And then the other main one was Siptrunk doesn't have contracts. How do I provide a contract for HyperNetwork?
Yeah, so HyperNetwork right now lives on our BCM1 and Flow Route network. So if we have to utilize that technology there, we'll actually, if it's an existing Siptrunk customer, we'll actually switch them over. We'll port them over to our other brand internally. So there's no impact there. And again, you will be engaged with one of our sales engineers.
And then compensation, just making sure.
Yep. So great point. For compensation, any contracted vehicle, the partner like yourselves will get contracted, whether it is from a BCM1 contract or Flow Route contract. And also, I forgot to mention, the pricing in the SMS V4 that David mentioned also includes dealer compensation. So anytime there is a contract involved, which includes the HyperNetwork, you will get compensated. More importantly, forget about compensation. It comes with an SLA. That is very critical when you're talking to organizations that are mission critical on incoming inbound calls. So next.
That's it.
Okay. All right, so that concludes our session there, folks. We will actually send out the recording to every person who registered, including the base of our Siptrunk partners. We'll also include in that communication the deck itself. So feel free to reach out to Mitch and his team, and by all means, we're here to help you guys out. So I appreciate your time. Once again, we value your partnership with Siptrunk and BCM1 as an organization, and definitely look forward to the engagement. Thank you very much and have a great day.